Everybody, we're in week 11, closing in on the end of the semester. I hope you're enjoying the class. I hope you're learning a lot and you are looking at some of this stuff in preparation for other classes, criminal law, criminal procedure. Tonight we're going to talk about criminal procedure stuff. One thing I wanted to talk about was you've got a written assignment, which I'll be in the process of grading, and your exams. I have another class that has drafts in for next week, so I'm going to finish the drafts first, and then I'll start working on the exams, and then I'll circle back and I'll finish your papers that you have prepared for the week. And we'll also this week then we'll have a discussion board on suppression of evidence and suppression. Suppression of evidence and fruit of the poisonous tree and all that kind of stuff. Tonight there's just a couple things I think we should talk about. The first is that idea of discovery, and that there's different types of discovery. Brady requires that prosecutors release exculpatory evidence to defense counsel, even without a formal discovery request. So this is, a really important factor when you look at people that are going into law enforcement. The idea that you've got to be really on top of your game. You can't you can't fudge on reports. You can't suffer any sort of misconduct allegations. You can't go to a internal affairs investigation and fudge on the facts a little bit to make it look better for you. All that stuff is going to end up getting you big trouble. And if it becomes Brady material, it could end your career. So really important for you to keep that in mind as you're dealing with the different kind of things that law enforcement becomes involved in. And exculpatory evidence can be evidence about witnesses and informants that you're thinking, well, maybe they're better off to not know about this. It's not worth having that tale of or that shadow of misconduct when you have a real good chance that it will be discovered by a Brady stuff, and then you're going to be not only in big trouble, but you're also going to be out of a job, out of a career. And it's a good career, so I would say do the best you can to protect it. Second thing is this idea of suppressing evidence. Factual guilt, legal guilt. Factual guilt was the guy actually guilty? Factual guilt is, can the prosecution put on enough lawfully seized evidence to convince a jury that a person was guilty? You can be factually guilty, but not legally guilty. And you pretty much have to be both factually and legally guilty for guilt to be found. And there's cases where people have been convicted and will be convicted who were not factually guilty. Those are very rare, and hopefully they will be less and less. You'll see less and less of that as forensics and other issues, other things come along. So the next step that we move to is are the cases that begin the concept of the exclusionary rule. And that's Weeks and Wolf, all stuff that you should know. If you're going to law school, take the time. I would read Weeks, and I would also read Wolf, and then see how the exclusionary rule develops. Exclusionary rule, put simply, is if evidence is unlawfully seized, then anything that comes from that is also unlawful. fruit of the poisonous tree. So there are exceptions that get, I hate to use this term, get around that, but they are, they're independent discovery and a few other things, pretty tough. And they're not readily available. More of your 350 stuff is going to be a discussion of interrogations. Miranda came along after a series of cases. So when you look at Miranda, make sure that you have a good understanding of what Miranda really is, because Miranda doesn't say that whenever the cops arrest somebody, they have to give them their rights. And I've had a ton of defendants say, oh no, I got you now, copper, because you didn't give me my Miranda rights. Well, perhaps, but the only time that Miranda is necessary is when there is custody and there's interrogation. If you don't have both custody and interrogation, then Miranda is not necessary. Several other cases will, come off of that too, and make sure that you have a handle on this little brief history of Miranda that we go through. The next thing that is talked about is going to be the search and seizure, the Fourth Amendment stuff. Fourth Amendment has two prongs to it. It's search warrant and reasonableness. If a search is reasonable, then it is good without a search warrant. There's a case that you'll read in 350 especially called Katz, U.S. versus Katz. And Katz has a whole bunch of stuff in what's known as the dicta. That's all the written stuff in the holding, or in the case that's not necessarily in the holding. In Katz, in the dicta, they suggest that, the court suggests that no search is valid without a warrant unless it falls under reasonable exceptions. And there's several different exceptions to that. And they apply different ways depending upon the circumstance. Are we talking the search of a person? Are we talking the search of a vehicle, of a building, a residence, commercial structure? Is it a special search, probation, parole, highly regulated industries? And think of that like people that make bombs or use explosives, not make bombs. They make bombs but use explosives. And that's one highly regulated industry. Alcohol is another. You may have been in a bar, although I don't think anybody in this class has ever been in a bar, but where the cops walk in and they do what the cops call a bar check. They can go behind the counter, they can look at alcohol bottles, they can inspect the license, they can go where food is prepared without a warrant. It's a highly regulated business. So those are the things that you're going to be dealing with in search and seizure. There's a discussion about the process. So an arrest occurs, defense counsel believes that there is an unlawful search, we'll say. Well, what they need to do, their next step isn't to tell the prosecution or tell the judge or tell the jury, because the jury's not around yet. The first process is known as a suppression hearing. And that's where defense counsel will motion the court that they desire a hearing to suppress certain evidence. And California, that's under 1538.5 of the Penal Code. So the 1538.5 motion's made, a hearing date set. The defense will present what's known as points and authorities, which is basically a brief of what they suggest the issues are and what the authorities are in regards to that. The next thing that happens is that the judge will then look at it and decide whether or not there's an issue. And if there is a violation of the penal code, I'm sorry, of search and seizure case law, then the evidence may be suppressed and will not be able to be used in the case in chief, or a trial at all, for that matter. Sorry, don't say that, the trial at all. So that's where we get to different factors, and then that is going to set a ability for an appeal, which you may see next. But those are basically the discussions. There's a discussion about whether or not the exclusionary rule should be abolished, and take a look at Hudson versus Michigan. That's a great case on this issue, in and of itself. And I mentioned it to a lot of you as I was been doing your different writing assignments. And I know you got a lot to do, and there's a lot of stuff in here, and you got exams to prep for and that. But I really suggest that you read the cases themselves and not rely on a commentator, because those are going to screw you up every time. By that I mean you're going to be reading something that is not helpful. So they could be wrong, and many times they are. Just be aware of that, and understand that if you go by what a commentator says and it's incorrect, then you are going to have, you're going to have a problem with it. So, all that being said, I hope you have a good week. I hope you do well in the exam. We'll get those ground out. Oh, one other thing in the exam, there's been some questions. I posted something on it, I believe. There's two parts. There's we call the multi-guess, and then below that is the short essay. The short essays will be available, or the actual total points will be available once the short essays are done. Okay, that should take care of it. We'll see you.